I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're ranking the bosses of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice from worst to best. Is there a boss I didn't include on this list? It's likely a mini-boss, and can be found on my Sekiro mini-boss ranking video from last week, link in the top right corner, and the description. If there's one thing I can say about Sekiro, it's that the main boss quality is absolutely fantastic. When you're able to design your fights around a single player moveset and a handle of Shinobi Tools, it allows for a stronger sense of balance than you'd get in any of the other soulsborne games. It's partly why some people leave Sekiro out when discussing FromSoftware's titles, but that's a shame because some of the best bosses in Soulsborne await. Now, please be aware I will not be ranking the Inner Genichiro, Inner Father, or Inner Ishin fights added in the Gauntlet of Strength update, as I've never beaten them, and I don't have time to grind them out this month. If you want to see my rankings, skip to the timestamp on screen for the start of the countdown, but for my regular viewers, however, I have a quick message. I just want to let you know that through July and most of August, I will be on a long holiday visiting my partner halfway across the country. This video was recorded and edited at the start of June, and once done, I'm gonna hop into Elden Ring to get footage for that game, so I can ensure you all have videos every week while I'm gone. Hence why I can't grind the inner fights, I just don't have time. Plus, I'd probably rank them with their counterparts anyway, as they're just those base game fights with a few tougher combos. So let's get things moving. All 15 Sekiro Shadows Die Twice bosses ranked, and be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Is it a surprise that my least favorite boss fight in Sekiro also happens to be the game's only puzzle boss? The folding screen monkeys are fought in the Hall of Illusions, a misty temple where your goal is to catch and kill said 4 monkeys, banishing them back to their screens. The gimmick is that the 4 monkeys embody one of these principles of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, do no evil. For example, the purple monkey has brilliant vision, so he's see no evil, but lacks hearing. The orange monkey will always alert its fellows, like speak no evil. The green monkey is just the opposite of the purple one, with great hearing and awful vision for hear no evil. And then the white monkey, do no evil, is an invisible foe who will always follow you from behind. Though in practice you can just kill him immediately at the start of the fight, which you should do. In theory, you're supposed to lure each of the monkeys into situations that are detrimental to their senses. Yet, in practice, it's easier to just chase the monkeys down and hope you get lucky. There's a looseness to this fight that I'm just not a big fan of. If you're going to be a puzzle boss, ensure that the puzzle the players need to solve is the best way to complete the fight. The only real dangers here come in the form of phantom monkeys that are summoned to chase you down as you kill more of the main ones, and they inflict terror damage when they hit you, so you've got to keep moving. If a monkey falls off of the map or you just can't find them, you can reset the area with the elusive hall bell that appears in your inventory, which is a nice kindness. But even then, this fight just feels tedious. I love Sekiro for its one-on-one deflection swordplay, and the monkeys don't offer any of that. It's just chase down your foe and hope you get lucky. It's completely at odds with the main style of gameplay Sekiro preaches, and while for a first-time player you might find the fight to be a novel experience, I guarantee on repeat playthroughs that feeling will fade away. None of the other bosses on this list give me that sensation, so... On my first playthrough, I ended up going to Mibu Village before the Sunken Valley, and because of that choice, I actually ended up missing the next boss. Perhaps that was for the best, because who thought it would be a fun idea to create a gank boss of the Headless Ape and his Guardian Ape bride right after the Poison Swamp with the Snake Eyes mini-boss? I've been very vocal in the past few videos about how I dislike gank fights in Sekiro specifically, as the combat feels weighted towards one-on-one encounters. And I'm also vocal about reusing content very quickly, which is the case here, as this boss is just a repeat of the Guardian Ape fight. If you went to the Sunken Valley first, you've likely just come from that battle because the Ashina Depths is the next story destination, so it's like going through a revolving door. Didn't I just fight you, you might think? So if you're going to do a gank boss, at least make it worthwhile, because while I love the Headless Ape's moveset, and I'll get to that in a future entry, that can't carry a fight with such a half-assed premise. The bride can be stunned and killed with 3 or 4 firecrackers breaking her posture bar, and this can be done in seconds. So what's the point? Why waste my time? I've beaten the Headless Ape already, and the bride goes down like a house of cards in a light breeze. This fight's only reason for existence is to give the player the hidden bestowal ninjutsu obtainable after killing the centipede left on the ground following the battle's conclusion. Couldn't that have been given to a mandatory boss? Or could we have just picked a different boss to lay in wait here? There were enough mini-bosses in this game that could have been upgraded to a main boss fight with some moveset tweaking, so it just feels like wasted and lazy potential. Perhaps a hot take, but next up is the Corrupted Monk, and we're officially in the territory of great bosses. Yeah, the bottom 2 are the only bad bosses in this game, the rest are fucking brilliant. And you may be able to guess, but the Corrupted Monk takes a spot near the bottom of the list for 2 reasons. One is due to the monk being an apparition-based enemy, Snap Seeds are able to do a good chunk of damage to a health bar without you needing to attack, which certainly makes the fight a lot easier, which was already easy due to only having a single health bar. And 2, the monk is a weakened version of a 3-stage boss fight later in the game, one that was in all the promotional materials, and thus it's hard to think I'd rather fight the false version over the real one. It's very reminiscent of Godfrey's Golden Shade in Elden Ring. You get a nice bit of practice against the first phase of a boss that you'll be facing later in the game, which is always a plus for me, as it means by the time you reach that real boss, they have the opportunity to build upon the knowledge you already have. But the false Corrupted Monk does leave a good first impression, from the floaty yet weighty attacks it throws out, including its iconic Whirlwind Beyblade spin, to the eerie laughter that accompanies her as she fights. It's ominous, further compounded by the arena, a creepy spiritual clearing behind an already disturbing hidden village in the mists. I really remember struggling against this boss on my first playthrough, and I have good memories of learning the moveset to take this gal out, so even though I can't rank them any higher, they still deserve props for being fucking spooky. From a pure spectacle perspective, the Divine Dragon is perhaps one of the best fights in the game, taking a cinematic approach to its boss fight that isn't terribly hard, and instead allows you to just feel the experience of slowly overcoming a divine beast. From the absolutely stunning arena atop the clouds with that dark blue night sky hanging above and a gnarled tree in the distance, the first phase where you take out the various tree spirits is fine. I like the roots that burst from the clouds to impale you, and there's something very enjoyable about jumping off those trees, spearing enemies, and swinging them around to take out their fellows. That is Dynasty Warriors. But of course, we're all here for the second stage, where the wind picks up and in a flourish of light, the Divine Dragon appears, this majestic beast holding a holy sword atop a sakura tree that drips with divine petals. The dragon blasts you away, and your new goal is to dodge the wind slices of its sword to make it to the tree roots that have been erected by the boss. One will have slight twinges of lightning which you can grapple to, and with a launch into the air, you can fire a lightning spear at the Divine Dragon for massive damage. This makes up the rest of the fight, and I had a pretty good run where I chained quite a few lightning blasts before it was able to send me back. There's an unblockable sweep swipe you have to jump over, and once you get the dragon down to its lowest health, it'll start attacking with diagonal swipes to try and catch you off guard. But ultimately, the Divine Dragon cannot stop Wolf, and with his last strike, he stuns the dragon long enough to obtain a Divine Dragon tier, which I love. You haven't killed this beast or even defeated it, you've merely stunned it long enough to obtain your prize and flee. I suspect the Divine Dragon is far more powerful than we know. Lore-wise, a fantastic fight, and cinematically great. I just prefer the in-depth fights above. If you'll allow me to take a few moments of your time, I'm trying to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2023, and I think we can do it. Over 60% of you aren't subscribed, so let's rectify that. Parry that subscribe button for more Soulsborne content every Wednesday. Back to the video. This may be sacrilege, as I think the Guardian Ape is one of the most iconic bosses from Sekiro, and I have such a soft spot for this fight. But I have to be honest with myself, for the purposes of Sekiro specifically, I do prefer the humanoid fights over the beasts, as it just works more with the player's kit. So by no means is this low placement based on boss quality, it's just personal preference. So let's sing some praises. The Guardian Ape found at the end of the Sunken Valley passage is easily the most animalistic boss FromSoftware has ever created. Its combos are a series of stomps and slams, no real rhyme or reason, which makes them hard to predict and deflect. His grab is this lunge that is incredibly difficult to avoid if you're up close, so my advice for the first phase will mirror my advice I gave about the Blazing Bull mini-boss last week. Run! Make distance, make space. You don't need to deflect his attacks when you can just outpace and outdistance his combos instead. The arena is big enough to accommodate for this. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the absolutely foul way he can poison you with his, gigantic gas cloud, often followed by him lobbing his shit at you, the most accurate depiction of an ape I have ever seen in a video game. Luckily, he's weak to firecrackers like every beast boss, but from the second firecracker stun onwards, he does do damage when he slams to the floor, so be careful. It's when you break his posture and slice his head off with the sword through his neck that the fight gets really good. You think it's over, and then he gets back up. This is an immortal ape, alive through the infestation method of Senpo Temple, and it completely changes the fight. Instead of being ape-like, the boss now slithers through the battlefield like a snake, or more accurately, a centipede, drifting through attacks with its sword as it thrusts and slices towards you. I prefer this phase because it's designed for you to deflect the sword and makes you feel like an absolute god once you learn the patterns. There's an AoE though that I'm not a big fan of that induces terror if you stick too close, but that's the only negative I have. If you have the loaded spear, you can also do massive posture damage to the ape when you deflect its overhead slam, as it'll be stunned, and if you hit R2 twice, you can thrust in and out of its head wound to damage the centipede inside. The contrast between the two phases of the Guardian Ape is what makes this fight so memorable and such a fantastic first experience. If I was just a bit better at managing the first phase, I might have put the fight higher, as I'm often viewing this fight through the lens of, oh, I can't wait to get to phase 2. So please don't crucify me too much, Potiphar. Starting off my top 10, we have...
My name is Kyobu Masataka Oniwa!
I thought I was supposed to be doing the introductions. The intended first boss of Sekiro, Gyobu bursts in upon his horse, spear in hand, ready to slay Wolf for his lord Genichiro. Once a bandit leader, he was defeated and then recruited by Isshin Ashina, becoming one of the most powerful warriors in Ashina's military. Wielding the spear of the Ashina clan's deceased rival, General Shuzen Tamura, he guards the castle gate to ensure that none may pass. And I immediately get sad, because it's clear this man was reformed into being a good person through Isshin, and we've got to cut his life short. Though, given his state of the arena, it's clear he's set himself to work on that battlefield. The actual fight isn't that difficult, as he's still the first proper boss of the game, and you can dodge a lot of his attacks without needing to deflect. His spear is so lengthy though that you may not know where the hitboxes you have to block until it's too late. And range won't save you, as he has the ability to detach the tip of his spear, sweeping it around him to create a ranged barrier where you'll have to grapple to him if you want to do damage. And that's not taking into account his horse, who will happily boot you in the face if you position yourself at its hind legs. But that steed is also Gyobu's undoing, as if you have firecrackers, his mount becomes incredibly easy to stun. This gives you a large enough opening to get some good damage on the boss, on top of the posture damage that'll come with it. My best advice beyond Shinobi Firecrackers is to stay as close to Gyobu as you can. His spear is easier to block at close range, and it allows you to counter when needs be. He's most dangerous at mid-range, as his attacks hit further than you expect, and long range you can bait him into charging at you, which is generally easy to avoid. Overall, you can't go wrong with Gyobu as a first boss, teaching the player spatial awareness on top of rewarding players who went out of their way to find the merchant selling the firecrackers. an honorable man who is granted an honorable death. I know the wiki doesn't classify Emma the Gentle Blade as a boss fight, instead tying her with Isshin Ashina for the Shura ending, but I think that's just disrespectful. Emma is worthy of the boss moniker and will make you work for your victory. As her title suggests, Emma is not one who wishes to fight, preferring to pursue the medicinal arts of her mentor. She literally is the equivalent of the "I'm a healer but" meme, and will only fight you if you decide to go for the Shura ending of the game. Even her katana isn't designed for combat, yet when she chooses to fight, she don't hold back. Having been trained in the ways of the Ashina arts by Isshin himself, it's reflected in the way she fights. Her moveset very reminiscent of the Sword Saint's first phase, but she mixes things up with her own extra attacks thrown in, most infamously her grab, which has the ability to warp between time and space to grab you even when you're certain you've dodged it. They gave her those hitboxes on purpose, I swear. Emma can be staggered out of many of her attacks, but if she's swift enough to start one of her combos, your best bet is to deflect and pray. I like the combo where, once the deflect ends, she stumbles for a moment, allowing you a free hit, and also showcasing her lack of true combat experience. She serves as a great entree for the fight to come, as her moveset is a scaled down version of Isshin's, so as you learn how to counter her, you can apply that logic to the next fight. Emma only has one health bar, but she makes the most of it, able to cross the arena in an instant to hit you as you're healing, making it a risky endeavor unless you're certain she's stunned. All this while a gorgeous theme plays in the background, melancholic and tragic in a somewhat upbeat way. And of course, bonus points for the arena. Fighting atop Ashina Castle makes every fight better, that's just a fact, it doesn't need to be said. If Emma had a second phase, she'd be higher on this list for sure, but for what she is, she's great fun, and I'd love to face her again sometime. Coming in at the midpoint of our list, we have the true Corrupted Monk of Fountainhead Palace. A 3-stage boss fight that really is only a 2-stage boss fight if you know what you're doing, fought atop the Autumn Bridge and guarding the rest of your level. Your knowledge of the false corrupted monk should pay off in this first phase, as the boss utilizes the same moveset, albeit scaled back a little for easier access. The music, paired with the gorgeous arena and the flowing grace of the monk herself, creates an exciting atmosphere that really elevates this fight. However, it loses a lot of points for her second phase, because despite having a second phase, it's immediately skippable by grappling up to this branch and then death blowing her from above. I genuinely don't know what the second phase even entails because it's so skippable. I've never done it, and I never will. It could be good, it could be bad, but since a majority of players are gonna cheese it, myself included, I don't need to experience it. After all, her third phase is tough enough for me as is. In this phase, the centipede controlling the monk erupts from her neck, and her attacks get more aggressive. Some are easily deflectable, but the challenge is that healing becomes much harder as a result of her increased speed. She can also break out that Beyblade attack from the false corrupted monk fight, which is brutal in this smaller arena. And on top of that, she has a terror-inflicting vomit attack that can very easily catch players off guard. Having to dodge an instant kill status ailment while deflecting a whole host of attacks without a chance to heal, it's brutal. It feels good to master, especially as you whittle down her health, but the learning curve is steep. It is possible to catch her in a stun loop with the Shinobi Firecracker, though just stunning her once or twice is enough to turn the tide of the battle. Whatever you do, it's your job to end her immortality and put her to rest, allowing you to progress to the palace proper. I love that her lore is actually based on Japanese folklore about an immortal priestess, Yao Bikuni, but with a darker ending in-game. As in the folklore, she came home to her village after 800 years and passed away peacefully when she had nothing left to live for, whereas the corrupted monk in Sekiro was corrupted by her immortality, fighting till the bitter end to defend Fountainhead. There is no boss that stirs more controversy in Sekiro than the Demon of Hatred. Either you'll find people who adore this boss fight for its unique twist on the Sekiro formula, harkening back to the older FromSoftware titles, or you'll find people that hate this boss fight as they're adamant that Sekiro's gameplay was not designed with this fight in mind and that makes it awful. Both of those can be true though, I'm the perfect example. The first time I fought the Demon of Hatred, I really enjoyed the change of pace the fight brings. It's the super boss of the base game, and is designed to be this ultimate challenge to overcome if you go looking for it. And the bestial slams, fiery attacks, and that brutal wombo combo remind me very heavily of Manus or the Cleric Beast. You're given more incentive to use the arena to the fullest, running from attacks you can't block, dodging his flame-based moveset, and just trying to survive. I loved learning how to get better at the fight, the best tips to use, and when I finally overcame the Demon of Hatred on stream a few years ago, it felt amazing, so I'd actually like to show you the clip of me beating him for the first time, as it really shows how far I've come since then. Woo! That was so close. That could have been so bad. Oh my god, wait, what? Oh! Oh, we did it! Oh my god, we did it! Oh my god, we did it! Ah! Oh, I'm so glad that happened when we had the clutch umbrella save. That was fantastic! Ah! And yet, 2 years later, that excitement has been tempered somewhat. I've since fought the Demon of Hatred again multiple times, and while I'd argue my skills are better now, I really struggle with this fight this playthrough. Am I getting old? Are my reaction speeds slowing down? Do I need to retire? Was my first victory on stream beginner's luck? My biggest issue was checking my greed at the door. I like to get in close and do damage, but that puts me on the end of his foot stomps more often than not, which absolutely wreck me every time. Combine that with his fire wave attack in the second phase that I feel I dodge correctly but sometimes get hit by regardless, and the way his unblockable sweep attack comes out so fast that I barely have time to react. Yeah, it was rough. I still love this fight, and the fact that it still challenges me to this day. It's easily one of, if not the hardest fights in Soulsborne, because even with the Flame Lotus Umbrella counterattack strategy, you still have to learn the moveset of this guy across all 3 phases. I did choose not to use the Malcontent Whistle for this playthrough, as I wanted to take the demon down without staggering him, and that felt good. But overall, I found the challenge to be a bit overbearing and got in my own way multiple times. It's just a gut feeling, but it's enough for me to knock the Demon of Hatred down to 7th place on my list. It's well designed, totally does work with Sekiro's combat, and requires the fastest reflexes, and to not get greedy with your attacks. But I think the rest of the fights on this list give you more breathing room when you fuck up, whereas our Hatred Demon is just oppressive, you know? In every Souls game, there's often an early boss that I'll enjoy because of their difficulty. A boss that is able to teach me more about the game's mechanics as I slowly grind my way to defeating them. And for Sekiro, that honor goes to Lady Butterfly and her mystical illusions. And the dynamic of this fight is one I love, of 2 shinobi who both know and respect each other, but happen to be on opposite sides of the conflict. Lady Butterfly, hired by Al to no doubt finish Wolf off, is a formidable opponent and a former teacher, so with that history, you don't know what to expect. What we get is a fast flourish of strikes that will test your deflection skills to their limits in the early game, because posture breaking the kunoichi is your best bet at winning the fight. In her first phase, on top of her generic attacks, she has a series of perilous attacks that she can break out that you need to learn. It's also vital that you have the Shuriken Shinobi tool, as it's one of her main weaknesses, for she can leap into the air, balancing on various wires she sets up around the room, and should you shuriken her while she's airborne, she'll be knocked down to the floor and briefly stunned, allowing you to get a hit in along with some posture damage. It's worth attacking her even when she blocks you, because posture damage is posture damage, and her weak defenses means that if you get some hits on her, it won't be long before she's struggling to regain her composure. That is, until you slay her first phase, revealing the boss you were fighting was nothing more than illusion, the real Lady Butterfly chilling on the Buddha statue yonder. In phase 2, her illusions become far more dangerous, utilizing homing magic attacks that are reminiscent of Prince Lothric's magic in the Dark Souls 3 Twin Princes fight. and at certain points, she can summon an illusory army to attack the player. If you have Snap Siege, you can dispel them immediately, otherwise focus on dodging them and Lady Butterfly until she dismisses them. Though at that point you'll then want to keep running because those illusions turn into the projectiles that will gun you down if you're not careful. My strategy has always been to try backing Lady Butterfly into a corner, as her AI will struggle to escape as long as you keep up the aggressive pressure. Just be careful of her kunai, as they can very easily stun you so she can get an attack off. I know there are some real cheese methods to beating this boss, but I respect her enough to fight on her terms, not mine. But if you're really struggling, the step dodge attack strategy can practically break her AI. In the end, it's sad having to slay her, and her final words ring true as she admits you've grown stronger. No bitterness, just an acceptance as she passes on. It says a lot when my top 5 fights in Sekiro are somehow dominated by 3 people. Anyone unfamiliar with Sekiro must be so confused. But starting us off, we have Isshin Ashina, who has fought atop Ashina Castle during the Shura bad ending, following Emma, the Gentle Blade. Knowing that he is all that stands between you and becoming a true Shura, a shinobi who has chosen the flames of madness, he takes up arms and, despite being an aged old man, fights you with the fierceness of his younger self. Most people will choose to face the Shura ending on a second playthrough, as it locks you out of Fountainhead Palace and the rest of the endgame bosses, so by the time you get around to facing this variation of Isshin, his first phase shouldn't be that much of a struggle, as he utilizes the same moveset as his Sword Saint Phase 1, complete with similar perilous attacks and his Ashina sword style that can sweep you off your feet. It helps that in order to reach this fight, you have to defeat Emma, and her moveset complements his beautifully. So for his Phase 1, you shouldn't struggle. It's his Phase 2 that we're really here to talk about, and what elevates him to the upper portion of this video. For his power boils over, and as the rooftop begins to burn, he takes those flames and directs them right at you. He can fire waves of flames across the floor, either in a straight line or a cone to catch you off guard, but his true power comes from his fire eruption ability, charging his power up until he releases it, causing all the flaming spots in the arena to erupt in fiery cylinders that will damage you if you stand on them. But that's not all, as he follows that up with his signature attack, One Mind, releasing a flurry of anime sword swipes before following up with an extra swipe soon after. I found that I was most caught off guard by his flaming sword swipes, as he'd always graze my hitbox and injure me, and that's not even mentioning that if you get greedy, you'll actually be punished, as attempting to hit him multiple times in a single go will result in him actively dodging your attack and striking you back. No other boss dodges out of the way like that, not even his Sword Saint variation, which makes this form of Isshin Ashina a dangerous foe. But if you fought the final boss of the game, you fought him too, and your muscle memory will eventually allow you to get the victory you so crave, and the flames of Shura will erupt across the land. This is going to be a hot take, but of the 2 owl fights in the game, Owl Father is my number 4 lower on the list. I want to preface that I think Owl Father is one of the hardest fights in the game, and the moveset is so incredibly fun to learn that I can't help but respect it. The first phase alone is absolutely brutal when you're just starting out, trying to figure out which of his attacks can be deflected and when the best moments to attack are. Dodging through his Firecracker sword sweep combo is the stuff of legends. Deflecting his shuriken and then dodging through his large sword swipe to strike him at his back feels legendary. Catching him off guard with attacks that are just in range to hit him feels great. But on the other hand, you can't charge any thrust attacks or you'll get Mikiri countered and completely outplayed. Shinobi Tools will only get you so far, forcing you to rely on your swordplay and instincts to see you through the fight. It's so satisfying to learn the moveset of Owl Father until his first phase is nothing but a memory, and that second phase hits you with a lesson on spatial awareness. You see, Owl summons a literal spirit owl that will aid him during the battle. He can vanish into thin air, then reappear where the owl flies, often attempting to get a backstab on you from behind. This can be alarming when you lose track of the spirit owl, and I often just run in a direction and pray I won't get hit before he reappears. The owl can also be used as a flaming projectile, and the pillars of the boss room are the only way I could find to counter that, followed by a thrusting attack you can try to Makiri counter, but I'll be honest and say I found Owl's thrust to be so hard to do correctly. The spacing has to be perfect, as does the timing, and 9 times out of 10 I missed the counter. However, despite the difficulty of the fight, I don't feel our father has the personality of his first fight, which we will get to momentarily. Though his words at the end where he dies happy having been beaten by his own son is surprisingly wholesome, the closest thing Wolf will get to closure as he slays his foster father. I totally see why someone would have this as their personal favourite fight, from the lore to the moveset to the difficulty, so hopefully number 4 isn't too offensive a spot. And speaking of the other owl fight, finishing on the podium with a bronze medal, we have Great Shinobi Owl, fought atop Ashina Castle as the Ministry invades. If you choose to stay loyal to Kuro and forsake the Iron Code, you and your father must duel one last time to determine who steers Kuro's fate in their hands. What I love about this fight, and that I think Owl Father forsakes to an extent, is the sheer amount of underhanded shinobi tactics Owl employs. In the previous fight we discussed, he used his shinobi firecrackers, shurikens, and his spirit owl. Here, he has the firecrackers, shurikens, poison spray, anti-healing orbs, and his overall demeanor from the start is one of a trickster. From the pre-fight cutscene where he fakes his tears before attempting to stab Wolf in the back, to the way he begs for mercy Dr. Wily style at half health before initiating phase 2 with an underhanded smoke grenade. Something about his lack of honor seems far more genuine to his character than the Owl Father fight, and it's just the vibe I prefer from a gameplay perspective, although narratively Owl Father does take the cake. I really enjoy Great Shinobi Owl's battle flow, as his combos are just hard enough to challenge you at this point in the game, but more learnable at a quicker pace than his Hirata Estate counterpart. There's something comical about him doing a long-winded combo just to end it with a graceful Shinobi charm drop. All the while, the music in the background is this, for lack of a better term, vile theme of a man backed into a corner, doing everything he can to slay you for his own goals. It's malicious and removes the facade of being a caring father and is perfect as a theme. You know who this character is through the OST and how warped and twisted his ambitions have made him. Perfect storytelling and deserving of my number 3 spot. Although to be honest, let's just let both owls have the number 3 spot, they're both fantastic. Today's silver medal goes to Genichiro Ashina and all of his variations across the game, for he had the hardest job of any boss in Sekiro. His goal as a fight is to showcase your skill at the game. The first time you fight this man in the flower field past the secret passage, you're naught but a baby wolf, barely able to hold your own, unsure if his moveset. And suddenly your arm is sliced off, your master is kidnapped, and your body is left to rot. Even if you New Game Plus it and beat him in the fight, you'll get distracted by a rogue enemy and still get your arm sliced off, showing how no matter your strength, you're no match for his strategy. Then, the second time you fight Genichiro atop Ashina Castle, you're forced to consolidate everything you've learned about Sekiro's gameplay up to that point, because Genichiro is designed in such a way that there is only one path forwards, and that is to learn how to deflect, how to use your counter abilities correctly, and how to read and judge your opponent's next move. He tests every skill you need to succeed in Sekiro, and encourages you to be aggressive in both your attacks and your defense, creating that dance the game is known for, the realization that Sekiro isn't just an action-adventure game, but an action-adventure rhythm game. I grinded this fight for days on my first ever playthrough until eventually Sekiro's flow just clicked with me. It takes time to unlearn soulsborne techniques, but like Bloodborne before it, Genichiro Ashina will mold the player into a Sekiro beast who will overcome the rest of the challenges in this game. Set to the most iconic arena used in Sekiro, with some of the best boss music blasting in the background. Two rivals destined to fight, never to agree, battling for supremacy and for custody of their child. It truly is the gay divorce we've always wanted. Genichiro's third phase is, ironically, his easiest once you understand the mechanics, and attempts to teach you about lightning reversals. If you are in the air when struck with a lightning attack, you can swing your sword and strike your opponent to transfer the lightning back. If you touch the floor while electrified, you take massive vitality and posture damage, and vice versa. But you can also avoid the lightning if it's too threatening to you, dodging to your right and working with the rest of Genichiro's moveset. Nothing is more satisfying than Mikiri countering that leap towards you he always starts with. If you can beat Genichiro here, you can beat Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. You have the skills, you have the power, you just have to hone them. And once you defeat Genichiro Way of Tomoe, you may think it's over. But nay, he returns one final time at the end of the game in the flower field where at the start of your adventure, he defeated you easily. And how the turntables. Aside from a normal mortal draw attack that is easily sidestepped, it's the same fight from atop Ashina Castle. And with your newfound power and experience, you can just brush away Genichiro like he's nothing, as proof that you, the player, have improved and overcome your rival, leaving him to make the ultimate sacrifice for the glory of Ashina, and with it comes the best boss in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and our gold medal, Isshin the Sword Saint. And for me, there was no competition. It's very rare that the final boss of a Soulsborne game hits me as the best boss in its respective title, but Isshin isn't a normal final boss. As you slay Genichiro Way of Tomoe, he strikes himself with a dark mortal blade, cutting himself open and summoning his dead grandfather from hell itself. Isshin crawls out of the open wound on Genichiro, taking up his sword and facing Sekiro. Only this time, he's physically in his prime, the same age as when he quelled the rebellion in Sekiro's opening cutscene. And despite being a mentor figure to us throughout the game, he's compelled by the nature of his return to fulfill Genichiro's last wish. And so our final fight begins. Isshin's Phase 1 is identical to his Phase 1 from the Isshin-Ashina fight in the Shura ending, only he'll use a large variety of combat arts to defeat the player. He can use his signature Ashina Cross, there's his Ichimonji Double, he can close distance with a Quick Slash, and even charge up a large vertical wave of force that hits not once, but twice to deal heavy damage. However, he has a weakness, being that most of his attacks, including his perilous ones, can be sidestepped. With good step dodging and follow-up attacks, you can ruin his vitality and posture bar in less than 20 seconds, but this requires you to be in a perfect flow state to pull off. It's his second phase where things really pick up. He reaches for the ground and reveals a giant spear, wielding it in one hand and the blade in his other. The man is fucking power stancing, able to use both weapons in tandem with natural ease. Now, his spear moveset for me is easier to deflect and opens him up more for Mikiri counter opportunities, but it's more punishing if you mistime a deflect as the damage is higher and the range is further. Oh, and he can just pull out a gun when he feels like it to blast you with a clip, because he's an absolute mad lad. Healing in this phase is incredibly difficult and requires intense precision to pull off, as most of the time he'll notice you healing and have an attack ready to cancel you out of it. That is, unless you just run to the other side of the arena and pray. I love his charged force spin attack, utilizing the wind to slice you down unless you block at exactly the right time. I talk about Isshin's moveset like I didn't take hours to fight him my first time playing, and I've fought him on multiple New Game Plus cycles too. His Phase 3 is much the same as his Phase 2, except the flower field is racked with lightning, and you know what that means, it's time for lightning reversals to take the stage. The challenge is the boss arena though, as depending on your positioning, you may not actually have the height to correctly attack Isshin with the counter. He can also use diagonal wind slashes if you're far away, which can also be blocked through alongside all the other attacks he was already doing. It's one of the largest movesets for any Soulsborne boss, but once you finally get those lightning reversals down, the biggest foe in Phase 3 is not Isshin, but yourself. Can your nerve handle it? Will your hands get shaky? Can you deflect at the right time? Or will your inner saboteur leave you restarting the fight from scratch? Landing that final death blow as Isshin lays there waiting for the end to come, conceding with honor as he kneels down, is about as epic as you'd expect. It's the perfect culmination for testing your skills, the story coming to a satisfying conclusion, and the epic soundtrack and arena which lands Isshin the Sword Saint as my favorite boss in Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. And that's my list. What did you think? Agree to disagree? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button for more Soulsborne content every Wednesday. Next week, we're moving on to Elden Ring. Let's go. My socials are on screen now, feel free to follow where you feel comfortable. A shout out to my patrons over on Patreon, you guys are awesome and keep my channel alive, thank you very much, and I will see you guys next time. Adios.